According to a recent CNN report from October of 2023, if you're feeling lonely, well, you've got lots of company. They quoted a new Gallup study that was taken across 142 countries, and it found that 24%, almost a quarter of people over the age of 15, they self-reported feeling very lonely or fairly lonely in response to the question, how lonely are you? And you know what, if you're a 20-something, the statistics are even higher than that. A recent report from May of 2023 from the U.S. Surgeon General that painted an even bleaker picture here in the U.S. According to that report, at least half of U.S. adults, and this is even before the COVID-19 pandemic, even half of U.S. adults reported feeling measurable levels of loneliness. And according to that same report, people are spending less and less time with each other than they did just 2 decades ago. Now that goes across the board, across all age groups, but for the 15 to 24 age group, that's particularly high. 70% less time now that they're spending with other people than they were just 20 years ago. All right, and you know what? Even if you're with people, you're not always with people, are you? Ever felt that way yourself? Ever felt lonely in a crowd? Ever felt lonely even in a church crowd? Seems to me that we're more connected than ever, and yet statistically there's like almost an epidemic level of loneliness. That's a lot of hurt. That's a lot of pain. That's a lot of heartache. And that's not the way God designed it. I mean, when God made people, God actually put a need and a desire for community, for companionship, for togetherness into the very fiber of our being. And the fact that there's so much of that connection is lacking in our world right now, and that there's so much loneliness in our lives these days, to me it's evidence of just how broken things have become ever since sin entered our world. Perhaps you've experienced that. Perhaps you've been in that lonely, broken place yourself. You might even be there right now. Maybe it's some chronic feeling you just can't shake, or an emptiness that you just can't fill. Or perhaps you're feeling that even though you want to be included in some group, some team, some circle of friends, you're just on the outside looking in, and nothing that you try is going to change that. Well, you know what? If that's been your experience, if that's ever been your experience, the story that we'll look at together from Jesus' life today, well, it has some good news for you. Because Jesus came to fix that. Right? Jesus came to bring lonely people, even those who other people consider outcasts or rejects, back into community again, even if they happen to feel invisible. Known and loved. Those are the two words that struck me in that little video clip. known and loved. See, all people feel this need to feel known, and they have the need to feel loved. Again, because God wired that need for community into us. But people don't always get that, do they? And that's why they feel lonely and disconnected from a larger sense of community, even when they're in the crowd. Instead of feeling known and loved, sometimes they just feel invisible and unwanted, maybe even unapproachable. And then also kind of stuck with an ache in their heart and an ache in their soul that just doesn't want to go away. That's what we're going to see in this event from the life of Jesus that we're going to look at. See, as Mark records it, there's a guy that Jesus runs into he was invisible to almost everybody. And if people did see him at all, they just walked on by as quickly as they could, or turned around and went the other way as quickly as they could. His only community, if you could call it that, was a kind of a loose connection with other outcasts, other throwaways, other people that nobody else wanted anything to do with either. And while they longed for a deeper connection and community with others, that community connection, it seemed well beyond their reach. One of the things that put them there, a disease that they had, medical science had no cure for their condition. So it was going to take a miracle for them to escape that lonely, outside-looking-in existence. And, miracles just seemed in pretty short supply. That is, until Jesus shows up. Let's look at that. Mark chapter 1.
A man with leprosy came to him and begged him on his knees, "If you're willing, you can make me clean." He reached out his hand and touched the man. "I am willing," he said. "Be clean." Immediately the leprosy left him and he was cleansed. Jesus sent him away at once with a strong warning. "See that you don't tell this to anyone, but go, show yourself to the priest and offer the sacrifices that Moses commanded for your cleansing, as a testimony to them." Instead, he went out and began to talk freely, spreading the news. As a result, Jesus could no longer enter a town openly, but stayed outside in lonely places. Yet the people still came to him from everywhere.
Now, the first thing I notice in Mark's recording of this event is that Jesus does God-sized stuff. Now, as I already told you, in the day there was no known cure for leprosy. And in the whole Old Testament, there were only 2 instances of prophets of God healing someone with leprosy. I suppose that's why the rabbis in the day were quoted as saying it is as difficult to heal a leper as to raise the dead. Right? That just didn't happen. But if you follow Jesus' story through, not just here, but all the way through, you'll see that, Jesus does both. Jesus heals the leper. Jesus raises the dead. Jesus even raises himself from the dead after dying on a cross. That is God-sized stuff. And Mark wants you to see that. Because if Jesus did it before, he can do it again, right? Same God, yesterday, today, and forever. Except when your existence is dominated by hurt and pain and loneliness and brokenness, and no one's been able to fix your brokenness, it's really hard to see that. And even if you believe that Jesus did God-sized stuff way back then, it's hard to believe that he can still do it for you today. But notice the faith of the leper here. I think that's the next big thing Mark wants you to see after the fact that, Jesus can do God-sized stuff. I mean, the faith, he wants you to see the faith of the leper here to ask Jesus for help, even when the rules told him to tell Jesus to run away, and his experience with other people was that Jesus would do just that. Even so, the leper here has the faith that Jesus could help him, even though it was a really big mess. How big? Well, like I said, leprosy had no cure, and everybody knew it. And that meant this leper had no way out of his lonely, pain-filled, miserable existence. He wasn't allowed to live in respectable communities. The only community he had with him was other lepers who were in the same sad state that he was. If he had a family, there were no family visits allowed. So his family was, well, they're as good as dead to him. He was supposed to yell, "Unclean, unclean," when anybody approached or got near. The only one who would touch him was another leper. And the kiss of his wife, the hug of his children, a distant, fading memory. Talk about a lonely existence, a hopeless existence, an outside-looking-in existence. Pretty much everyone's afraid of you, and pretty much everyone knew that you were most likely stuck in that condition for the rest of your life. And yet, despite all the evidence against him, the leper here believes that Jesus has the capacity to do something about his problems. Let me read it to you again, verse 40. A man with leprosy came to him and begged him on his knees, "If you are willing, you can make me clean." Now, I think Mark makes sure to record that phrase because Mark wants to invite you to have the faith of the leper. Mark wants to invite you to believe the unbelievable, even the seemingly impossible, that Jesus still does God-sized stuff, and that Jesus can heal your brokenness and your emptiness, even though nobody else can. In fact, that is what Jesus came to do. Jesus came to heal the brokenness, the pain, the loneliness, the outside-looking-in feelings that Satan brought into God's perfect world when Adam and Eve believed his lies and chose self over God. And with this leper, well, there's certainly a lot of brokenness associated with leprosy. There's physical pain, emotional isolation, separation from community, actually shunned by the community, and the likelihood of this lasting the rest of your life. No cure, remember. And what Mark wants you to understand here is that Jesus doesn't like any of that. All right, notice what Mark says here, verse 41. Jesus was indignant. Indignant, angry, mad. And what's Jesus mad about? Not that the leper had the audacity to approach him. Jesus is mad that Satan had made such a mess of things in the first place. He's mad, he's angry at the physical and an emotional and the spiritual toll that sin and death and disease have taken on his world and on his people. And aren't you? Aren't you mad about that too? I mean, in fact, before going on in this conversation, stop and think about this. What messes or brokenness in God's world make you angry right now? And why? Hit pause and spend a few minutes thinking about that. You know, sometimes when you look at those messy, broken things that you were just thinking about, you might feel like blaming God, as if it's somehow God's fault that the mess is there, especially if you're the one experiencing it or feeling the loneliness or the isolation of the situation. But in reporting that Jesus healed the leper, I think Mark wants you to see that actually it's the opposite is true. Right? Mark wants you to see that Jesus doesn't bring your pain. Jesus comes to heal your pain. Let me say that again. Jesus doesn't bring your pain. Jesus comes to heal your pain. And so when Jesus heals this man with leprosy, something, again, no doctor in the day could do, Jesus shows that his power to heal is greater than Satan's power to destroy. And Jesus shows that he's taken the battle right to Satan and that he's winning. And Jesus shows that hurt and pain and brokenness, they won't always be your reality, even if it is your experience right now. See, Jesus doesn't like the mess. Jesus doesn't like that lonely, outside looking in feeling. And Jesus came to deliver you from that. So remember, Jesus created you for community, and he wants to restore that to you. Starting by restoring the relationship you've got with him. Now, we don't have all the answers for the timing of that healing. Jesus healed this guy, but he didn't heal every leper that he ran across. Why some, not others? That's one of those unanswerable questions, even for people of faith. The only answer to that one is, well, I don't know. I'm not God. All right, but if you follow Jesus' story all the way through, what you do discover is that while the when is unknown, the what is guaranteed. The what is guaranteed. And the what meaning that one day everything is going to be put right again. I mean, Jesus actually gave his life to make it so. And miracles like this one, like this healing of the leper, they're like a sign, a seal, a down payment on that ultimate healing that's going to come. You see, in this healing, Jesus is saying to people of all ages, Jesus is saying, I am stronger than Satan is. And what the devil broke, I can fix and I will fix, even if it appears to be unfixable. Jesus says to people of all ages, I will heal your pain. I will fill your emptiness. I will erase your loneliness. I will reconnect you to community. I will make you whole again. And I'm going to start, Jesus says, by inviting you into a deeper relationship with me, which opens up all the other healing, whether it's now or in the future. Now, there are probably times in all of our lives when we need to be reminded of that. Perhaps it's even now. Maybe you feel a little bit like the leper, hurting on the outside and hurting even more on the inside, feeling lonely, isolated, abandoned, feeling like you have some sort of a stigma attached to you, feeling like nobody wants to be around you, perhaps feeling that maybe even God has forgotten you. When that's where you are, don't be afraid, like the leper, to cry out to God, just like the leper cried out to Jesus. Because notice what Jesus does here and how he restores the leper to community. I mean, when people saw a leper, pretty much everybody would run away. But Jesus is not afraid to come close. And even when all the health rules said don't, and all society's standards said don't, Jesus is not afraid to touch. And think about what that touch of Jesus meant to a guy who hadn't experienced that sort of compassionate contact in quite some time. I mean, the touch of Jesus as he comes near says, not only I see your pain, but I'm willing to enter your pain and to come alongside of you no matter how messy it gets. That's how much Jesus loves him. And that's how much Jesus hates the mess that he's in. And that's how much Jesus wants to bring this guy back into community. First, a deeper connection with God, and from that, a renewed connection with others. I mean, do you see what's happening here? Jesus enters all that pain and brokenness and loneliness and emptiness, and he's restoring community. And he restores community before he even healed the guy's leprosy. And the place that started was an up-close personal connection with Jesus. And experiencing the rock-solid truth, that's still true today, that Jesus will love you and hang out with you no matter what your condition is, whether it's inside or out. So if you're struggling with any of that kind of brokenness, if you're hurt, pain, loneliness, that outside looking in feeling, maybe a feeling that you're not only disconnected from others, but maybe even a little drifting or disconnected from God, Mark wants you to see that Jesus comes to you the same way. He loves you and he hangs out with you no matter what your condition is, inside or out. See, Jesus could help from a distance. There are times you'll read in his story that he did. But here, Jesus comes close. And Jesus wants you to feel his touch. So Jesus comes right into the brokenness and right into the loneliness to help you through it. To help you through it and to undo the mess that Satan's making of your life. He can do God-sized things, remember? Oh, and one more thing. Did you know that Jesus has actually given his followers now the job of helping people find their way back to God and back into community with others? And wading into the mess and the brokenness and the loneliness to do it? Here's a little Bible on that. 2 Corinthians chapter 1. He comforts us in all our troubles so that we can comfort others. When they are troubled, we will be able to give them the same comfort God has given us. And I think that gives me something to think about as I make some, what I'll call church connections from this story of Jesus and the leper. I start thinking about, are there do not cross lines that I can and I should cross in order to connect with other people? And if so, what touch does that person in the mess need so that they can feel wanted? And how can I then wade into the mess like Jesus did? How can I wade into the mess and help them feel the touch of Jesus so that they can connect with Jesus and reconnect with other people? You know, when I'm doing that, I'm doing Jesus' work.